Hi, Eugene. Welcome to my podcast.
Vitor, I'm very delighted to be invited, and thank you indeed for inviting me onto it.
Yes, it's a great pleasure. So I'm very happy for two reasons. First is episode 30. So I made to 30. Not every podcaster is this patient and persistent. So I'm happy with that. And to celebrate it, I think I have a great guest like yourself. So I think two reasons to be extremely excited for the next hour. So very looking forward. Just if you don't mind, as a starting point, would you mind just introduce yourself to the viewers?
Okay, so Eugene Doyle is my name. I am a presenter of a current affairs program on community radio Kilkenny City, a program called Kilkenny Today, and I present it on a Tuesday and a Friday between 5 and 6. And I have, whilst some of it is about Kilkenny, other issues are about national and international issues that I cover on the program as well every week. So, and that's what that's my main thing that I do is Kilkenny Today.
Interesting. I'm very curious about your views on the media and on the radio, because there's not a lot about the radio these days. It seems neglected, because there are more and more media platforms. So I'll be interested in understanding how do you see the radio within the wide scope of media these days. What can you guys deliver? What are the advantage and disadvantage of not being the main sort of media these days? How do you see the role of the radio overall?
Yeah. Okay. So I think the advantages of a radio program, a radio station like I work with, and the programs that we do, is that we can actually give time for the guests to answer. In other words, I would have three main topics on my program in the hour. So I have usually about 15 to 17 minutes with a guest. So instead of interrupting the guest all the time when they're about to say something, like you see in the national media, they're interrupted every time they go to say something. I ask the question and I give them time to answer the question, because I'm trying to allow my audience, my listeners, to listen, to hear what this person has to say. Whether they agree with it or not is not the issue. It's to give the person time to speak and let them be heard about what they're doing. So that's, I think, is the main difference between community radio and the national radio. And as I say, because it's based normally around community, it's to give communities a voice. And there's certainly no point in having a voice if I, as the presenter, keep interrupting them when they're talking. So that's what I like about the radio program that I present, is that I give my listeners, or give my guests, the time to get across their story.
That's exactly the impression I had when I listened to a couple of your interviews. I found the whole environment genuine and real. It was almost like a chat, let's say, in the pub,
yes,
or coffee shop, and I at least I thought that was the intention, and I think you just acknowledge that that's something you do with that specific purpose, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
That's very good, because it's very good because there's space for both. I would say to be very challenging for guys like Pete Morgan, who tend to jump on that. The guest.
I don't even think you have to go. I don't even think you have to step outside the island of Ireland to get people who'd be challenged doing that in RTE and various other stations who'd be challenged in doing that and giving people time to speak.
Look, I'm going to assume my ignorance here. I'm not that versed in Irish media, but maybe I'll take the opportunity to learn. Who would be the equivalent of Piers Morgan in the Irish media, if you mind?
I suppose you have Claire Byrne would be the on radio. She'd be the person on RT radio. Then you'd have the likes of I can't think of his name at the minute now, but on Today FM and News Talk. I just can't. Sorry, I can't think of their names.
The gentleman who's around 40, 45.
Yes.
I can see his face and I can listen to his voice.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name because I'm like you. I'm very bad with names. Yeah.
And they would have come to me if I wasn't on the show, of course. But they'd be the style of thing. the style of like Piers Morgan. Yeah, there's no doubt. Yeah.
Yeah, the only time I had let's call it pleasure of listening Claire Byrne on a radio program. I don't remember if it was radio or TV, but anyway, was an interview. Was when she was having a chat with Nigel Farage, and I found her very much disrespectful. It's not that I would agree with Nigel Farage what he was saying necessarily, but I think he was just there like playing a role or trying to send a message instead of just having an open conversation with the guest. I found a lot of the disrespect from her towards the guest, which I think it's awful.
Yeah, I think as journalists, the whole idea is to, in my opinion, is for you to put your own views leave your own views outside the door and give the person a chance to speak. Because whether it's Nigel Farage, who is very popular among a lot of people in the UK, and he I mightn't agree with everything he says, as you don't, but he actually speaks a lot of truth as well. Yeah. And that truth is not acceptable to the left-wing media, so it's not. So I suppose that's what you're dealing with.
Yeah, 100%. Do you think the media in Ireland is dominated by the left-wing, or there is not?
Oh, for sure.
Space for the others,
yeah. For sure, there's actually space. There's actually space in the media, I think, for more right of centre. I don't mean far right. I mean right of centre views. I think maybe the closest that do it at the moment, but they don't do it on radio. It's gripped. Yeah. Gripped media are probably the closest that you'll get to an alternative opinion to the left. That's but there's no radio that would be seemingly take a right wing views on things rather than the left wing. Yeah.
And the other issue is the moment you divert from the main narrative, you won't be called center or center right or even right wing. You are immediately labeled far right. There's nothing in between.
Exactly. This is the thing. This is a conversation I have with many people when they talk about the far right. Yes, of course, there's far right. There's also far left, and someone with a conservative opinion should not be labelled in far right, because that's really not fair, and it's labelling someone and kind of taking away. It's taking something from them, that because they have a conservative view, that they can then be just thrown into it, labelled and pigeonholed into being right wing, or far right.
Yeah. So tell me about your trajectory. I think you spent some time in the Middle East.
Oh yeah,
as I remember, in Lebanon.
Yes, I did. I did 21 years in the Defence Forces here in Ireland, and I did 2 trips abroad. One was the first one was in 1984. So from November 84 to April 85. Now, that was at the time when Israel had invaded Lebanon in 82, and I was there for kind of the withdrawal, or coming towards the end of the withdrawal and the peace negotiations that were going on at the time. So I would have spent time in a place called Hadatta in southern Lebanon. That was the headquarters of the company that I was with, and I would have also spent time in another place called Rashaf, another place called Atiri, and not all of the company I was with spent time down in Tyre. Everyone's familiar with that place. It's one of the I think it's the turning of the water into wine, I think, happened in Tyre. So I would have spent some time down there, where I was based in a Lebanese army barracks, where they were training the Lebanese to take over on the border when the Israelis had fully moved out of Lebanon. So yeah, so I would have seen a lot. At that time, I was Vitor. I was 20 years of age, very young, and I would have always held the narrative back then that the Israelis were the bad guys and the poor Palestinians were the good guys, and I would have held that view because I suppose we served with UNIFIL, United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon. Now, in latter years I've always questioned whether UNIFIL is actually independent of between Lebanon and Israel. Because when I was there, we spent time among Lebanese people, lovely people, absolutely lovely people. There's no other word about them. They were lovely people. But our forces spent their time among the Lebanese people, and I begin to wonder in latter years then, do the UN and do the UNIFIL really take a middle line between both sides? That's my take on it now. I suppose one incident. I suppose I always thought the Israelis were kind of arrogant at one point. I remember I was telling Marco a story on another thing. I was telling him that I was on a checkpoint in Hadassah, and an Israeli jeep pulled up full of soldiers in it, and our job was to stop them and stop anyone coming through the thing. And I said, "Where are you coming from?" And he says, "Israel." I said, "Where are you going?" And he says, "Israel." So, so I suppose that compounded my view at the time. But
I think there was some. Sorry, I think there was some humor on that, because the Israelis have a great sense of humor, like yourselves, the Irish.
Yes, yeah, and I don't think that is appreciated here whatsoever. And we'll come to that, I suppose, when we talk more about the media and about how we view and how we see Israel thing. But yeah, they do have a sense of humor. There's no doubt.
So you were there for how long? You said 20.
I spent 21 years in the Defence Forces in Ireland here, and I spent 2 6-month trips abroad.
And how did that change your perspective of the Middle East and the road in general?
Well, I suppose at the time I would have taken the line, as I say, the line of that the Israelis were the baddies and the others were the goodies. But I suppose as time moved on, I went back again in 2000. I went back in again in 2000 when to make some videos of the Ireland pulling out of Lebanon. At the time, there was a break where we pulled out, and I remember when I was there back in '84. I remember there was a lady there, and I asked about her when I was there in Hadassah, and they said that she had gone to Beirut. She had married. She was a Christian woman. She had married a Muslim, and they more or less said to me her life went downhill after that. And when I saw her, she actually turned up in thing. Now obviously she wouldn't talk to me. She had the full veil on, and but she certainly looked a fright at that time. So I got a shock obviously when I saw her. But it's only really in the last, I suppose, 10 or 15 years, I begin to see a different side to the conflict between Israel and.
Was there any event that caused that change, or?
I suppose I grew up with Marco in Ireland here. He was raised here, born here and raised here, and he went then on to he went to Italy at 20 or thereabouts or whatever after schooling, and I got back in touch with him, and I suppose when I got back in touch with him, I suppose what he did was he didn't try to force anything down my neck about the thing, but what he advised me to do was he advised me to read about the conflict. And what I found interesting about him was he told me not just to read one side, but to read both sides.
Yeah.
So that you're getting you know, you're getting to a position then you can make up your own mind on these matters. And I was absolutely flabbergasted when I started reading the material about, you know, about their connection to the Holy Land for over 3,500 years, and that, you know, the line here in Ireland here is that they are colonial and they took the Palestinians' land. Now, I have read a number of books, and none of them confirm that. They confirm that the Jewish people are a decent, upright people who do not go around taking people's land. They bought every piece of land that they are on, and land that's occupied, that is occupied, was taken for security reasons, and nothing else. I mean, no other country in the world would put up with what Israel has had to put up with in relation to its lands. But it's the narrative here, Vitor, is that it's always compared here to Ireland under Great Britain for 800 years, and the British on our soil here, and you know, only getting back 20 of the 26 counties back after the treaty and all that. But in that case, it was colonial because and the British were known for being colonial, and so as bad as the IRA were, and they were bad, as bad as they were, they never ever did anything like what happened on October 7th to men, women, children, civilians, soldiers. They never did anything like that to anybody. And to compare the two, to me, is a travesty, and an inaccuracy that should be corrected, because it has fed the line here, the consistent line here, that Israel is a colonial power that has taken this land off the poor Palestinians, which is completely untrue. And not only that, but the majority of the exit of the Palestinian people from that area was due to their own people, due to their own leadership, who thought that it could go in and take Israel out after in 1947, again in 1967 and 72. They thought that it could go in and they told their people to leave the land, and you'll be back in it in a matter of weeks, you know. And to me, the Palestinian people are essentially Syrian. They're Syrian people, but it's in the geopolitical interest of all of those Arab states to keep this going, because Israel is the only one true democracy in the Middle East. And, you know, this is what really annoys me about Ireland, is that it would take the side of dictators and you know, and very, very cruel people, leadership, against over a democracy such as Israel. And Israel's democracy, in my opinion, is way beyond what democracy would be in a lot of countries.
Yeah,
way beyond it. Now, and by the way, the Israelis are not perfect in any way whatsoever. They're not, and the way that some of them have carried on during this war leaves you leave your mouth open and gaping as to what in the name of God are they doing, you know, because they're not perfect. But in Ireland's case, now at the moment, Netanyahu is the problem. If he's not the problem, it's someone else or something else is the problem. So Ireland has to have a body in Israel in order to continue the line that is taken. And I find that and I find it grotesque, to say the least. And then to cap it all, then to go and recognize the state of Palestine in the middle of a war where they have Hamas have went in and slaughtered children, raped women, slaughtered men, women, and children, and took hostages, and we reward them with this decision by Ireland to recognise the state of Israel, or the state of Palestine.
It's shameful. I think they use that as a way to promote themselves, because they believe that it's translated into votes. I'm not quite sure if it's exactly the mathematics they are thinking. They might get some popularity, but not as vast as they are expecting. Because I think there is still a gap between what the government thinks of the Middle East and the average people, and I would like to get your thoughts on that. Do you think people are lying? Not as much. What's your perception?
Is this the Irish people?
Yes.
Yeah. I think there is. I see where you're coming from this. I think there is definitely a disconnect between the Irish people and the Parliament. The Parliament is a far left-leaning Parliament, and this narrative has been driven by the far left, to calling on the government to recognise Palestine. And I think it's dangerous for democracy in Ireland to have the Parliament the way it is, because there is no balance of opinion in the Parliament. I could probably count on less than one hand the amount of people who could openly get up in either the Senate or the Dáil, the Parliament, and defend Israel. There's probably less than a handful that would do it. That doesn't mean that there's less than a handful who actually believe that there's something wrong here, and that it's not all Israel's fault. But we've got to the stage now where people are afraid to speak about how they feel on these matters.
So what would be your word of encouragement? So let's say one for the people who have influence, the politicians, media, professors like in university, and the other one for the everyday person. Like, what would be your word of encouragement for these two individuals? Because I think they have different fields and they have different ways to impact others. So what would be your word of
I would say to people who would be on the fence, who'd be leaning, not sure which way to believe, what to believe here, I would suggest to them to do exactly what I was advised to do, and go and read and look beyond the narrow window of media in this country, and go beyond that and search for yourself and research what is actually going on, how this conflict is being perpetuated for eternity, if you like, is what they want to do this. I suppose I'm not ashamed to say that I'm a Zionist. I believe that the Israeli people, the Jewish people, not the Israel, the Jewish people, I believe that they are right to have a homeland of their own, because everywhere they have been, even in France at the moment, Jews are scared. Jews are scared here. There's over 2,000 Jews in Ireland. They are scared. They can't come out and they can't identify as being Jewish. They can't do that. Now, that's not being safe in a state, is when you can't identify what you are. And there's good people in Ireland like Jackie Goodall from the Ireland Israel Alliance, who puts her heart and soul into try and bring the two communities together, the Ireland and those Jewish community together. Then there's the likes of Maurice Cohn, who's the chair of the Jewish Representative Council of Ireland. Those two and others are doing Trojan work here to fight against this elitist view that sanctions should be put on Israel. Israel is committing genocide. Israel should be, don't be buying goods from Israel. All of this and blaming the Israelis for everything. My cue there was when I saw far left politicians running with the story. I said, "There's a cue to start looking at something different and seeing," because I couldn't take their view. But I would definitely advise people to go and read and make themselves familiar with it, because what the Jewish people and the state of Israel contribute to the world is phenomenal. What they can do in medicine, in technology, in everything that they make our lives. Most of it emanates originally from Israel.
Yeah,
and it's not seen, or it's not appreciated.
Yeah, people are afraid to recognize their merit because it will look bad at the eyes of others, and for the vast majority of people who listen or watch this podcast, they do it on the mobile phone, and they don't know that the technology was developed in Israel. So if they are unhappy with this podcast, they don't only need to switch off this conversation, but also from their phone on the bin, because otherwise they are not being coherent. But that's how people are. But you touched on one thing that I found very interesting. So Marco mentioned that you should read both views of the conflict, and for me it's revealing that he was sure that he was right about it, because if he wouldn't be that sure, he would never tell you there are the two views and you can make your mind. And I think when the narrative only shows one side, it's already an indicator that they are not right about it, because otherwise they'll be very open. Here are the two versions, make up your mind. I'm sure I'm being honest, so I have nothing to hide. So I think the more they set aside a version, the more we should be doubtful about what they are telling us.
Yeah, I mean, if we just look at the coverage, of the media in this country and the BBC, for example, just two items that struck me in the last couple of days. One was a NATO country, as in Turkey, threatening to invade a democratic state, which is in the charter of NATO is not allowed, right? Yeah. Now, I could be wrong, but I read media here, and I never saw that covered on any media in Ireland. On the thing that in actual fact, Erdogan is seen in Ireland as an honest broker for what's going on in Gaza. That's how he's been portrayed here, is that he's an honest broker. Now he threatened to invade, and people should take him seriously, because he also threatened and saw through the trade barrier with stopping trade with Israel on many items of trade that they stopped. So I wouldn't dismiss their words, his words at all, and I think that there's been far too much dismissal of statements coming from Iran, from Turkey, that they're I think they're looked at as here as if to say, look, they don't mean anything to us. But everything those people say, there is a meaning to it, and there's a purpose to it. And that purpose may not be quite seen right now, but it will be seen if we don't wake up and act. That's in my view.
Yeah, and I would add that in the meantime, the Irish population, as in residents of this island, this beautiful island, I would say, has changed dramatically. So I'm here since 2009, although I left twice, but the first time I put my feet on this island as a resident was 2009, and the demographics changed drastically. And I would say not in the right way, because if I look at the safety is not the same as it was 10 years ago or 15 years ago. And Irish people would know it even better than me. And I wouldn't say that it's fault of the Irish, although the Irish people messing up and troublemakers like everybody else, no. But it's mostly of people coming from non-democratic countries that we tend to have sympathy with.
Yes.
How do you see the demographics change in Ireland?
I see the demographics. I agree with you. There's a huge change in Ireland from the country that it was. I think the Ireland of saints and scholars, as they used to call it, is long gone. I think that the immigration issue here is real. It's real. It's not. It's been classed as far right, but the people see that there's actually no real policy when it comes to immigration. That it looks like it's being made up as they go along, and that's what the feeling is. I don't agree with any of the violence that's taking place in relation to. I don't condone any of that violence that's taking place. But those vacuums have been filled. There's vacuum. When you put a vacuum there, it's filled by people like thugs and people who want to cause trouble. So when you create a vacuum like that by not having a clear and consistent immigration policy of what type of people you're allowing in here, are they being screened coming in? Are they being screened for, because no one knows what those people have been up in there. I would expect to be screened if I went into another country. I would expect to be screened. I'm screened if I need a visa to go into. That means I'm being screened.
Yeah.
Do I have a problem with that? No, I don't. But what's happening here is we're bringing people in here and they're not being screened. And yes, the level. I'm not going to blame it on any community, any particular community, but the level of violence is gone up. I think when you're dealing with immigration, I think you need to attract people who are able to coexist and integrate into the communities in which you're bringing them into, and not creating ghettos. And if anything, we're right beside Great Britain, and it had the textbook of how not to do it. And we're right beside it, and we're repeating the same mistakes, and so a lot of the axis of evil is headed by Iran. When they took power in '79. They weren't joking when they said that they were going to export Islam right around the world, and they're doing it. They're doing it. And don't get me wrong, there's plenty of many Muslim people who are decent, honest people who don't see the Quran as some of the leaders see it. And those people shouldn't be blamed. But for us to be ignoring Iran and ignoring what's going on and sucking up to them is to me is just pure dangerous. That's
yeah. I mean, you just touched on that point that people arrive, they are not screened, they can just get in, they are even supported, get benefits that we will never have, even if you work like for 20, 30, 40 years in your whole life, and they get it in 2 days, if not early. Of course, that will make people upset, and some people have brains, some people don't, and then they will act violent, and there's nothing we can do about it. And of course, there has to be control. Like this week, I've been posting in my podcast an interview I had with an American writer based in Japan. Okay, and these guys, we basically talk about how is life in Japan, in the countryside, and I was never much into Japan myself. I had nothing against Japan, just I had other interests. And the more I hear his insights about Japan, the more I'm interested in. And I was thinking, what if I don't fancy life in Japan? I just take a plane and say, here I'm arriving. I want to live here. I love sushi and samurai, and I want to stay here. That's it. That's simple. It cannot be. It cannot be that that 1 + 1 is 2. You need to arrive with some credentials. With you need to arrive with not only credentials, but as you said, with an intention of integrating and adding some value and respect. Where you are. It's essential.
Yeah.
Like myself, so just I go a bit further on this. Myself as an immigrant, I think I cannot just come here and pretend everyone eats like Portuguese do and watch soccer. It's not like that. It's you can do those things at home. You might have your community, but you cannot impose. That's the least thing you should do, is impose. And on top of that, you need to absorb at least some. You don't need to convert to the place where you are, but you need to absorb some. If you are the same person you were when you arrived, then why did you came here? I ask, why did you came here? It's pointless.
The other point about benefits and what people are getting when they come in. I mean, a lot of that is also down to lack of communication with the public as well, because if you're not engaging with the public about what's going on, what happens is a story gathers legs.
Yeah.
And it becomes it grows out of proportion, and it may not be all the benefits that they're getting, but it grows out of proportion because there's been a lack of communication on from the government side. And I think that's what part of the main problem. But just going back a second, Vitor, just to the media again, I was very interested. You're familiar with Sacha Baron Cohen?
Yeah, I am. Very
Yeah. Okay, so he slammed the BBC the other day. He slammed the BBC the other day for their headline about the 12. It was 11 children that were killed.
And he is not exactly a right winger.
No, absolutely. But the BBC had a headline: 11 dead in rocket attack on Israel-occupied Golan. Right now, he changed the word "dead" to "murdered." And he also changed the occupied Golan to a children's playing ground, a soccer ground.
Well done.
And I thought it was very, very powerful.
Yes. Especially coming from him, because he's
exactly as you say, he's not right wing.
No. I mean, he was mocking the Republicans in his last documentary.
Yeah.
So he's on the BBC side on plenty of topics. So he's not for sure an agent of Putin or Trump. If they say that, I mean, they can say everything because you never know these days. But it's coming from him, I think, is even more powerful. So
absolutely, and you probably listened to my interview with Paul Coulter.
Yeah.
And I was very Paul Coulter is the national director of the what's it again?
It's some Christian
Christian embassy in Jerusalem.
Yes.
Christian embassy in Jerusalem, and he's the Irish director here for it. But when I interviewed him, Vitor, one thing that stood out for me in that interview is that he said that we should be so grateful to the Jewish people because they have given those of us who are Christians, they have given us our religion, because Christ was a Jew. It came to that we owe so much to the Christians for the religion that we have, and I thought that was a very telling remark, very powerful remark that he made about that, and it really made me think about what he was saying here, because we just continue to berate and down the Jewish people. And I thought that was very powerful what he had said to me just in that word, in that sentence.
Yeah. And I was just thinking here, like in the parts of the road where the woke virus didn't infect that much, say part of Latin America, not the whole Latin America, but part of Latin America, Africa, and Asia, that recognition is there, and is there 100%. People look at Jews as the people who brought the laws and order to the road, and they have a huge respect for what they provide, and they'll never forget. And when I was, I don't know if you were at the last pro-Israeli rally in Dublin, in Stephen's Green, or started in Stephen's Green, and the amount of black people that were there, black Christians, was huge. I was impressed. I mean, I'm not going to say here a number, but they were for sure more than 10%.
Yeah.
More than 10%, which is a lot, because, as you know, there are not a lot of black people in Ireland, except if it is an RT yard, but that's another story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But that is something that we need to build on in Ireland. I believe is to build on those people who try and promote emergence between the Christian community and the Jewish people who are a minority here, but as I said earlier, are afraid, and they need support. They need support. Ireland always uses this thing that we've nothing against the Jews. It's against the Israeli government. Now, I don't buy that. Because when it's any Israeli government been right as far as Ireland is concerned, they haven't. So with the elites, I'm going to say it. I'm just going to say it out. I believe that it's anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
I don't believe the Irish people are anti-Semitic. I believe that the elites are. And I think it can be, nothing else. You can call it anything you like, but it is anti-Semitism, and it's anti-Jewish people. I mean, I recently had a former army officer say to me, when I was saying to him, like about the war in Gaza, and I was saying to him, are they not right? Are the Israelis not right not to mow the lawn anymore? They need mowing the lawn. They've been mowing the lawn for years, and it's got them nowhere. Are they right not to mow the lawn? And he said, look, he said, there's no one saying what they're doing. I'm not saying what they're doing is wrong, but he said, it's just that they always have to have the last word, and it's just that they're Jewish. And I just couldn't believe it. I was after hearing,
Yes, it's so stupid that it's hard to believe.
Yeah.
Comments. I think the elites, like especially the elites who are not elites, let's say the new rich, let's call it the new rich. Like, what happens is they don't have the dignity or the nobility that the Jewish people would have, even if they are just workers, if they're just like security of the shopping mall. There is some sense of, I think it comes from education, some sense of what is a human being, what are you here for, an understanding of community, how to interact with others. And people don't get inflated the way that I would say in the West, including we do, because there is this sense of superiority we have just because we are the wealthiest, we are we are where everyone wants to come, even though then we blame ourselves that we are racist and we treat minorities with despise and all that, which is, to me, it's just a complete nonsense, which tells like how much contradictory is the speech, because on one sense we say like we are the perfect heaven, on other we are always pointing out issues and blaming these people and the others. So I think there's a lot of paradoxes.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm always fascinated. I don't know if you want me to lead this. I don't mind, whatever you want. I'm always fascinated with this, the two-state solution. I'm always fascinated with this because Ireland keeps, and not only Ireland, but Ireland and so many other countries keep peddling this two-state solution. Well, now just let's look at it from this is my point of view on it, or how I see it. The leadership of Hamas, the leadership of the PA, do not want a two-state solution. They don't want it. They want a one-state solution. In other words, that the Jews would be downtrodden under them. That's what they want. And I believe that when you see the majority of the Palestinians in the PA territory supporting Hamas, it's very difficult for me to see that ordinary Palestinians think any differently than their leadership.
Yeah.
It's difficult to see that. Now, when I see that, and was it who was the famous scientist that said, when you keep coming back to something with the same, trying to apply the same solution to a thing every time, it's the definition of insanity.
Yes.
And the two-state solution will not work. It won't work. It won't work. I'm not saying it will never work. It could work in 25 or 30 years' time, provided that the Gaza Strip and the Judea and Samaria, those areas where Palestinians are in the West Bank, if they were de-radicalized, demilitarized for a period of whatever, 10 or 20 years, until you got a number of generations that no longer were taught to hate Jews. And that's what they are being taught in their schools, in their textbooks, in their writing, in their acting, in their summer camps. They're being taught to hate Jews. I mean, that is just, and how we fund the likes of UNRWA. Yeah. How we continue to fund UNRWA under those conditions, when you see what's happening in UNRWA schools.
It's unbelievable.
It's just incredible. It's absolutely incredible. Yeah. That we're using taxpayers' money here to fund that. In what should be happening there, in my opinion, is the UNHCR should be in there and UNRWA gone. And because the UNHCR is about redeploying refugees to a decent standard of living, a decent life. But what you have under UNRWA is you have an organization that is perpetuating the conflict, perpetuating this right of return that was never ever going to happen and will never happen. The right of return, because it hasn't happened anywhere in the world. Never happened. The right of return. But I thought Netanyahu's address to the Congress last week, I thought he came out with some interesting ideas. And one has to take their hat off. In this case, I don't agree with everything that Donald Trump does by any means, but I have to say that the Abraham Accords were definitely were definitely the creme de la creme of his presidency, because what they have done is they have created friends for Israel, allies that were seen to help when Iran fired all its rockets at Israel there earlier this year. And what Netanyahu called for was a NATO-style alliance in the Middle East to counter the threat from Iran. And I thought to myself, now that is a very, very clever move and a very worthwhile option to look at. As well as him saying that there should be a multinational Arab force headed by under the Americans to go into Gaza and oversee its de-radicalization, its rebuilding of it, and that overall that the Israeli would have some still security over the thing, which is absolutely essential. It's an existential threat to Israel not to either have a multinational force in there of friendly and kind of normal Arab countries in there, and with Israel as part of the security. I think that is the only way that you could even aim towards a two-state solution. But it's certain nothing could happen, in my opinion, for the next 20 or 30 years. But you could certainly work towards it.
What could happen, let's say, in the diplomatic environment for that to be an option? Is it something that has to happen within the UN, in the White House, or?
Well, I think the White House would have to take up the baton on this one in relation to what Netanyahu is suggesting, because the friendly Arab countries, when they're friendly, there's been lots of there's lots of history between them and Israel, but they always seem to go to the Americans when they want to do something collectively, and they want the Americans to be involved or leading it. So I definitely think the Americans need it. The UN, look, it would take another podcast to look at the UN's behavior since October 7th and its treatment of Israel, and how long it took to recognize that or to accept that women and a thing were raped on October the 7th. I mean, the UN it's another story. It's another story that needs to be looked at. But I think the Americans, in the first instance, would be the people to try and get a multinational force, a NATO-style alliance to counter the threat from Iran, because that threat is there and that threat is real, and it's not imaginary.
Yeah. So, as someone who spent a couple of decades in the Irish Defence Forces, do you think the Israelis have that advantage that most of their politicians, if not all, let's say 95-98% of them, spend some time in the military? Is there an advantage to that?
I think there is. I think there is an advantage. I think there's an advantage, and I also think there isn't an advantage, because I think this comes to my view on some of the things that are happening within Israel. I think that there is too much. The political is not enough divided from the military in Israel. I mean, you have military people questioning the elected government of the day, questioning decisions that they make, and doing off the record things about the prime minister and about this and that. I think they're too close. I think obviously the Israeli Defense Forces is not like the Irish Defence Forces. I mean, it is on a war footing all of the time, practically 24 hours a day, because of the nature of the conflict there. But I think there's some benefits to the government having some military expertise in its ranks. But I think it's far too. I think the military is far too close. And it should be, in my opinion, distant from the political, decision making in a democratic country. I think it's too close. That's my own opinion.
Just on a personal level, like what were the lessons you got from being in the military role for that much of time that you brought to your day-to-day life? Is there anything you can carry and implement?
Yeah, I suppose. Look, I got the one thing that I got out of the army was a discipline. Certainly a discipline. I believe in Ireland here. I'll get back to my thing in the army. I believe in Ireland here that there should be a form of conscription for young people to discipline them and to get them used to being disciplined. I was the most unlikely candidate for the army in Ireland, but I went in and signed up one day, and I just went in and signed up, and I found parts of it very hard to come true, but I got through it. But I found the discipline in it. I found the empathy that I could show for people, the negotiation, the kind of meeting with other armies of the world, meeting different cultures, everything. I found the army to be really a benefit to my whole life. I would never write it off my life and say and try to forget it, because while it had its ups and downs, overall I have to say it was really good for me to be in the Defence Forces, and to and the friends I made in it, and the action I saw, and the people I saw, and the places I've been. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It was.
If you don't mind just going to the downside, because I was thinking here, okay, I agree with everything you said from A to Z in terms of advantage, but there must be some challenge, because I believe the military road, it's a bubble. And the moment you step out and you are dealing with everyday individuals, there must be some obstacles, like there must be some adjustments. Did you face any of that?
Yeah, I'm kind of I'm kind of, in one way, I'm kind of laughing at some of what's going on in Ireland at the moment in relation to Defence Forces. They're talking about going back and talking about abuse and people being abused and shouted at and everything like that back through the years. I mean, that happened to me. I mean, that's what an army is about. I'm sorry now, but an army isn't about asking someone what to do. You kind of tell them what to do, and you tell them, but a commander gains the respect, has to earn the respect of the people who are under him or her, and the downsides. The downsides is I suppose is that you are in danger. You are in danger unless you have the ability to think otherwise. You are in danger of becoming institutionalized in an army for that long. Yeah. Now, the one thing I always said when I had 21 done, I always said that the day I had 21 done, I would leave, and I left on the day, on the hour that no more than 21 years, exactly to the minute I left. And the one thing I did was, during my time in the army, I never allowed myself to become institutionalized, because I wanted to have a life outside the army, and that would have been very difficult to have that. And it is difficult for a lot of people who will leave the army early to try and do something else with their lives. That's the downside of it, is that you can become institutionalized. And the important thing is to keep a toe in the outside life as well. And don't let yourself be into. But that would be the real downside, is that you could become institutionalized.
Yeah. I would add that is true to every aspect of the public sector. I think the public sector has this mindset that we are a big we, and there are no individuals. It's for me, it's very scary. And I believe that the way to cope with what you just said, you need to make sure you have a personal life, which is just your interests, your passions, your the things you care that are not necessarily related to your profession, because otherwise you are just part of a tribe, and you can easily be no one.
Absolutely, and you're right. It is in the public service as well. There's no doubt about that, and that's where unless you find a way to detach yourself from the military all the time, unless you could find a way to detach yourself from that, sometimes then you become intolerant of what actually goes on the outside, and you become like the politicians who go into Leinster House. They go into a bubble, and they don't realize what's going on outside that bubble, and that's so that's the danger of it.
Which is happening
yes
day and time, very, very much. I think the more that the politicians are dissociated from reality, the more dangerous they are, because they try to think themselves as some specific creator. They don't really have proper connections with individuals, so they don't know what's going on, and they just talk on RT, and they think they care, and maybe they even lie to themselves. I think at some point they are as much as imposters as innocents, because they are just acting as fools.
I think one of the things, Vitor, is that when I look at leadership now among politicians, leadership now compared to even 30 years ago, leadership is no longer there. It's not leadership. It's about sound bites and about, kind of not being proactive, but being reactive to media coverage. That's not leadership. Leadership is being proactive, taking decisions, whether they're popular or unpopular. They're in Ireland now. When I see, again, I know lots of people don't like Netanyahu, for example. I believe he is a leader.
Yeah,
I actually believe he is a leader because he has withstood so much international pressure during this war. So much US pressure, international pressure, and he has people baying at him about the hostages. I know if I was a family of a hostage thing, I'd be wanting those hostages out as well. However, he has a broader decisions to make. That if he gives in now, for example, and mows, that's like mowing the lawn, and you allow them back in just to get your hostages back. The existential threat to Israel needs to be dealt with first before the hostages, in my opinion. As much as that breaks my heart to say that, I think the security of the state of Israel is far more important right now than the hostages, because it is about the existential existence of Israel. And if it's allowed, if they're allowed to lose, if they're made to lose this war, the Israelis are, if they're made to lose this war, and God knows what's going to happen next. So back to leadership. I think that is leadership, is when you're able to stand up and make a case for no, we can get more out of Hamas by grinding them down, by defeating them. We can get more that will ultimately stand to the security of the Israeli people. Because who knows, with the hostages, we don't know how many are dead and how many are alive. We don't know that. It still means that all those hostages have to come back, whether they're dead or alive. They need to come back to their families. As I said, if I was a family of a hostage there, I'd be wanting this. Yes, I would. I'd be on their page. But I can see the broader thing here, that Netanyahu has to look at this thing not from just a hostage point of view. He has to look at this from the security of his people. That's the way I look at that, and that to me is leadership.
Yeah, well, 100%. I think, and it takes a lot of courage, and that's something that he has, and not many politicians have. Not only in Israel but all over the world, and he has those credentials. It's probably what I would call twilight of his career, but just related to his age.
Yeah.
That's the only reason. But he probably has been, if not the top prime minister of Israel, but is somewhere there, like on the top three.
And there's no doubt, and there's no doubt that he has done many things wrong. There's no doubt about that. I mean, but that's what leadership is about. You don't always get it right either. When you make decisions, you don't always get them right. But if you're prepared to put yourself before the people, even though you may have been wrong, and you get elected again, well, then the people obviously didn't take that. They elected him. He's the democratic elected leader of thing. Now, the far right ministers in his thing, I get that. I get that they are. He's having a job trying to temper them and manage them, which is a job in itself.
Yeah,
a job in itself. But and it's not to say that everything they're saying is wrong, but they can be extreme in some ways, and he's trying to temper that and thing. And is he trying to stay on because he has cases against him? I don't think so. Those cases are going to come against him when he leaves anyway. So I don't think that's the reason. I think he has decided here that mowing the lawn is no longer an option, I think that's what he has decided. I could be wrong, but that's what I think.
So you're, just to wrap up, because we're now above 1 hour, your battlefield now is the radio and the media. So what are your prospects, for the near future? What are you trying to achieve? Objectives? Anything you want to share with the audience on that regard?
What do you call it? I have a day job. I have a day job that I do. I don't want to draw anything into that at the moment. It's not for this forum, but I like the radio. I love interviewing people. I love giving people the chance to voice their opinion on something, to get across their story, and without interrupting them. And I will always do that, and because it's not about me. And I think in some of the national radio stations, I think it is about. Sometimes it's about the presenter. It's not about the audience. And to me, that's not the case. I like presenting. I like people. Of course I like people to listen to me, but it's not about me. It's about the stories I get, and that's what it's about to me, and that's what I'd like to continue to do.
Yeah, I think you do it very well. Hopefully the RT and the main media can learn from you. I would be a bit skeptical about it, but if one learns, I think it's already an achievement. So
absolutely.
Well, let's hope for that. Look, Eugene, was a great pleasure chatting to you. It was really, really insightful in terms of your experience in the Middle East, in the army, in the media. There are so many environments, and you seem to be but to have a lot of knowledge about all of them, because they're all different, but I think you kind of interchange them when it comes to the lessons you receive from every single field. So I think it's very, very interesting. So thanks for this. It was a great pleasure.
And I'm honored. I'm honored to be invited onto the Vitor Vicente podcast. I'm really honored to be invited, and thank you indeed for inviting me on.
Okay. Take care and talk soon.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you, Vitor. Thank you.